Oh, yes. This is the Hardcore Marketing Show. I'm Casey Cheshire, your host for this epic journey. And today's show, sponsored by Cheshire Impact, on a mission to help people maximize their use of Pardot and Salesforce. CheshireImpact.com. Bam. Happy Friday, everyone. Even if it's Tuesday when you're listening, today for the next hour or so is a Friday because this is a podcast. We're going to have a great conversation. The guest, I'm excited to talk to her today. I couldn't think of a better way to end the week, to have a fantastic conversation, learn about marketing strategy. She is a marketing thought leader, business strategist with over 17 years of experience. Man, we're going to get into some things today. Sales, marketing, corporate strategy. It's that business strategy. It's not just marketing in a silo, but understanding how it fits into the whole world of business and high-level B2B strategic business planning experience. Man, I can't wait to talk about planning. She's an award-winning thought leader and director of marketing communications at Taconic Biosciences. Kelly Owen Grover, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Casey. Happy to be here. Excited to talk to you today.
Yes, I know. And it was a struggle because we almost got into like 3 or 4 or 5 different topics that we were just like, let's go, let's talk about this stuff. You have experienced a lot of things. You've seen it working, you've seen it not working. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop talking and pass you this thing. It's kind of heavy, but I know you got this. Okay, here you go. Thor's hammer. Go ahead,
I'm
grab that.
taking Thor's
Got
hammer.
it?
I got
Okay.
it. I
Here you
got
go.
it.
You got it. Take Thor's hammer, smash for me some kind of myth, bogus strategy, misconception. Just set the record straight once and for all.
I love it. So you and I did talk about several different topics, and there's one that I think isn't really discussed often enough that certainly means quite a lot to me, and I think really places marketing beyond just a department and really as a hub of corporate strategy. And that is the concept that the go-to-market pathway isn't a relay race. We're not passing the baton from the product group to the marketing group to the sales group. It's a feedback loop, it's a flywheel. And you're constantly refining and improving that process. But again, it is not a linear one. So that is what I would like to smash today.
Yeah, it's the idea of the go-to-market and how it ties into product, right? Like it all in all the innovation around there, marketing really should have its hands in that. I don't think we realize that. I don't think I mean, marketers are what? We're kind of CYA with leads but there's so many other areas that we need to play a part.
Agreed. I was thinking of real world examples to kind of kick off this conversation. And I
Right.
pulled out the famous 4 Ps of marketing, right? So you've got price, position, promotion, and place. Almost anybody, whether you're a marketer or not, you guys know the 4 Ps. But when you think about it, okay, here's the 4 Ps of marketing, but all of those things aren't really decided by marketing, or even if they are, you certainly aren't deciding them the day before you launch,
Huh.
right? So that conversation starts way before launch date, right? And it doesn't start in the silo of just marketing, it starts in conjunction with your product team, right? As they are developing this concept, and with your sales team in how you're going to ultimately position it within the marketplace. So to me, that felt like a really familiar and tangible way to kick off a conversation about something that, to be quite frank, it is complex, right? It's interesting by definition because it's more than just marketing, but I think that's also what makes it a little hard sometimes for people to wrap their hands around.
How do I approach the product side? How do I integrate with that? And I'm just thinking department, but that functionality, that part in the creation, in the flywheel, how do you, let's say you've never done that, like and I don't even know if I have. Like, I've only been like a digital marketer, or maybe I have been involved with product, but I don't really know my place. So what's your advice to marketers? How do they start getting involved, and what does that ideal involvement look like?
Sure. I mean, it's company dependent. So
Okay.
I've
Yep.
worked at companies where this is really well defined and it predated me. I've worked at companies where we were really, myself and others, the ones who created it, and
Yeah.
everywhere in between. So I think step one is just to understand what exists within your company and who currently plays within that atmosphere. Um, regardless of what the answer is to that question, to me, the success is dependent on three things. You need a process, right? This is extremely complicated, long-term, multifunctional type stuff, right? You have to have a defined process. You have to have data, right? And in this case, we're talking market research. We're talking about your sales funnel. We're talking about post-launch adoption and revenue. And lastly, but I would say most of all, is you need engagement, and engagement across not just the other two departments in this flywheel that we're talking about, and that's again product and sales, but ultimately every department within a company probably is going to come in and out of this process along the way. And to go back to your original question, right? If you don't know where to start, where do you start? I actually think engagement is the first step, because no matter where your company is on that spectrum of super well defined process or, hey, we just started thinking about this last Tuesday, engagement is the part that you start with, because no matter what the answer is, the process is never going to be perfect, right? The data is never going to be perfect. And that is part of why I think about it as a flywheel, not just that these three departments are working in a pattern that constantly repeats itself and together,
Right.
but the process itself is constantly being refined in an iterative process and improved over time as you get better at it. So I'll pause there. I think I just said a lot, but I think to answer your question, I think you have to start talking to your colleagues. You have to start understanding the pressures, the motivations of their side of the world, and just start putting pen to paper.
Wow. This helps too because right, the process to find, refine the data, the market research, these things are never perfect. It's part of an ongoing cycle, but really engagement, getting outside of your single department, the box you're in, getting outside and communicating. What does this look like in a perfect world? You mentioned you've worked at places where it's really working. What does it even feel like for a marketer to interface with the product side and the sales side like that?
So it feels very consistent. Maybe if you are asking me to pick a specific word, I think consistent is the word I would choose. And I say that for a couple of different reasons. One, I think the best processes are the ones that are repeatable and scalable. And you only get there if it's consistent, right? If every product's going to be different, right? So that experience will be unique each time around. But my role, the deliverables, the things I need to do, and the way we interact with each other, that type of consistency is what makes it easy to navigate each one of these product development processes.
Okay.
The other thing I would bring up with consistency is, especially for our sales team, the people who are the voice of the things that we bring to market, the more consistent we can be in what we give them, the tools that we give them, how they're organized, the messages you're going to give. Here's all of the different assets that you can tap into. If they know what to expect each time, then the learning curve for a new product launch is limited to just that product, which is a lot easier of a lift than combining the whatever information on that product. Plus, here's all the different tools and resources that you now need to learn as well, right? It
Right.
makes it easier to do this over and over and over again very easily.
When you mentioned the word consistent and that it felt consistent, I think a lot of us want things to feel more consistent. We're kind of like maybe it's our own fault chasing laser dots like cats sometimes, but that consistency isn't always there. Sometimes we're constantly rebuilding the same thing or changing or pivoting on every different foot. Is that how do we break that spell and that trend of being inconsistent to get more to that consistency?
So I have the luxury of working with a bunch of scientists. So when we get together, everybody's
Nice.
thinking about it from the scientific method. So that's how I'm going to answer your question. And so I think part of the lure of consistency is, if you thought about it as an experiment, it means you're removing variables, right? And so to your point about consistency and testing, if most of the elements are consistent, then as you do A/B testing, or you pilot a new way of doing something, or you introduce a variable, it's easier to isolate the impact that that one change had, right? Versus if every time you develop a product and launch it and sell it, everything could be different along the way. Well, when it works or doesn't work, how do you know what really
Yeah.
influenced it, right?
You
It
have
would
no
be a
idea.
horrible scientific experiment. So to me, that's the other reason why you control what you can, because of course you want to innovate here and there. And that's not what I'm saying. You want to be able to make those improvements in that flywheel over time. But the stuff that you hold constant makes it easier to see
Mhm.
what impact those changes have.
So true, right? Just removing the variables, treating it like a scientific experiment and not changing a few things, allowing yourself to, like you said, innovate on a few things, but you got to have some consistency so that you can know what was actually affecting, what
Yep.
was the driver of the change. Yeah. Um, Question. Yeah. As I hear about these different groups and interacting with them, I've often heard the concept of like sales are internal customers. Do you feel that way? And if so, how do you feel about product? Are they internal customers, partners, coworkers? How do you view the other departments in terms of your relationship to them?
It's a really good question. And I've been in sales and I've definitely I consider it a really big mantle to shoulder, right? You are in charge of bringing in the money that fuels everything. It keeps the lights on. It lets me pay for my house. It
Right.
is a
Right.
massive responsibility. And so I always work hard to honor that because I know what it's felt like to have that mantle. However, to your question, I think it's somewhat not the right word to say that they're our internal customer, no more than I'm the internal customer of product and they are to me. And I think that's part of what I want to smash, right? Is if it's a relay race, if we're passing the
Right.
baton, it
Yeah.
feels that way, right? Here, I'm done. Let me give you all of the responsibility and let me go walk away. And of course, as soon as you say it that way, you're like, well, that doesn't make any sense, right? That's not partnership.
Yeah.
And so that's what I don't love about that characterization. But that's not to say that our job isn't to make sales successful, right? And it's not product's job to partner with us to create fantastic products that address needs of the marketplace. But again,
Right.
it's just that terminology that I think holds us back sometimes from asking critical questions, right? Because if someone's your customer, you almost want to do whatever they ask of you as opposed
Right.
to solutioning with them, right?
Right.
What's your need behind the need to kind of, use that old school sales jargon. That's kind of what I think about here, in that as product is expert in their area, marketing for our sales for theirs. I don't want you to always say yes to me. I want you to tell me what I need to hear. I want you to be honest. And so that's the one thing that I would say with thinking about other departments as your customer.
I've never heard that. And I think I totally agree with it. I totally agree with it. Um, that's like you sort of slipped in another myth on me about, well, I know it's related, but the idea
Yeah,
of just calling them a customer, I'm sure there's books on it. I'm sure there's conference topics on it, but it's totally right. That kind of a word gets us in trouble, just like passing the baton. I always hear the lobbing a grenade over the wall,
right.
where it's like, I don't really care what happens to it now because I've passed it on.
Yep.
And I could accidentally, and I guess worse than at least a baton, they at least have it in their hand, or you
Yeah.
look like a doofus too on the track. Like, guys, you got to work together here. But throwing it over the wall, you don't even know if they caught it. You don't even care if they caught it.
Yeah.
Um, so, so not customer, but not throwing things over the wall, um, but really working more of like a partnership or something like that might be a better word for that, because you're right. You don't want sales shouldn't, even if they think they want, neither of you want the other person to just say yes to something.
Mhm.
And that's how marketing gets in trouble, just becoming the print shop for sales. Just sure, I'll make that. I'll make that. Okay,
Right.
what's the need? What customer segment are we going after? That kind of thing. Yeah.
Agreed. And I think that's the other part of the process that I will highlight. So, ideal future state is the world's most elegant process, right? And everybody kind of dreams of it. But even when you're there, the reason why I highlighted engagement as the number one priority is the process won't fix you. The process won't fix a product that is not right for the market, right? Critical thinking, humans that are going to interrogate each other, right? And challenge each other via the process, right? The process brings you together at defined milestones to have these conversations. That's the value, but not that it's going to catch missteps along the way. That's not the goal of this, or in my opinion, any process.
Interesting. Another thing, you really you excel at really calling out the I don't know. It's there's something else to that because you start with a phrase saying, elegant processes, it's the most beautiful thing in the world. I'm thinking, yes, yes, we love process and let's map it out. And it's the thing we must protect. But then we're like, okay, it's not. It's just a tool to help you come together at a certain point in time to say, is this working or isn't it? And we need the humans to be using their noggins at that particular point in time to say, it's not, we're not addressing that need. Let's talk about it. Let's fix it. That you got brought together by the process, but you're right. Process alone. Oh, we have a process on that, so it'll catch everything. It's like, no, we need the individual parts to play their role to make that happen.
Agreed. And this is probably the right time to say, we're not perfect at this. I've never
Right.
been at a company that is perfect at this. And again, that's not the point. That's why you constantly are improving as you learn over time. The point is you create a process, a forum, and you have respect with your peers. And I do have the most fantastic colleagues that we can ask these critical questions of each other, that we can say, wait a minute, something doesn't feel right. Let's pause, let's whatever, let's huddle. That is the whole point. And again, the process organizes it. Maybe that's the right word, right? It brings organization to
Yeah.
all of these critical conversations so that they happen and move forward in a timely manner. But it's that engagement, that's respect, that we're not each other's customers. Again, I'm going to go back to that because I think it applies here. We are each other's colleagues towards a common goal. And if my sales team fails, then that's my failure. That's product's failure, right? That
Right.
we are all equally invested in this.
Right. You paint an amazing picture, and it must be amazing to collaborate with you. That's iconic, and I think the inevitable question I have in my mind, hearing it's not perfect, but it's like you got a process that brings you back together. You have a great team that respects each other and it gets it done. So, with all those things being addressed, or at least scheduled to be addressed, what kind of things keep you up at night? What really is the thing that you think about and maybe don't quite have nailed down?
So when we first started talking, I said there were three things that make
Yes.
up this puzzle. And we've talked process and we've talked engagement. We haven't talked about data.
Mm,
And that's the answer to your question when it comes to what keeps me up at night. So part of having these really thoughtful conversations and really the drive to want to be better each and every time we do this means, okay, it's an experiment. Let's look at the data. And then when you want to do that and either you don't have the data or it's dirty or you can't connect things, especially with marketing, right? Attribution and our stack. And I will get to the stack later, but that's where all of this really starts to coalesce. And when we have data, it's fantastic. But I would say when we either don't have data or it's not usable for whatever reason, that's the stuff that I think really keeps me up at night. And the stuff when we think about the iterations on this flywheel that we constantly go back to. Wait, we wanted to make this informed decision and now we can't, right? We did all the right stuff. We got to this place where it's like, okay, we need something to either support or refute what we're saying. And I can't even answer that for you. That drives me crazy, right? You've come so far just to have something goofy kind of trip you up.
yeah, and you can't make the call. You don't know. It's either dirty. Worse is if it's dirty and you don't know it, and you're making
Right.
calls based on it, or you just don't have it. Or to your point, it doesn't connect. You can't get into usable format. Yeah, I could see how that it, almost like a linchpin or something where it just that can trip up the whole thing if you're not minding it. It certainly has its place on your list because yes, engagement and yes, process and these things could be singing. But you're right. If you don't have if the data is funky or not accessible, then oof,
So for us, what I would say we've seen more often than not is that we will try several different things.
okay,
Sometimes it's deliberate, right? Hey, we've never done
yeah,
whatever before. Let's try two, three different ways to see what sticks. Sometimes it's not deliberate, right? That we're just going to try a couple of different things in hopes that you can parse out the signal from the noise, right? Even if
right,
our data collection isn't perfect, that one of these things will shine bright enough that we can say definitively, yes, right, this works or it does not work. So we try to work around it, and there's a ton of data effort going on. But again, I don't know any company that would sit and say, my data stack is perfect and my data is perfectly clean. Again, everybody has work to be doing
Right.
towards having a totally functioning stack, not just for their department, that can inform the entire company.
And I guess that leads into that conversation on the tech stack. And I think this is the appropriate order where we didn't start. It's not starting with tech. We start with strategies, conversations, the process conversation, the engagement with the team, and then we think about how to build all that to function maybe in a repeatable, scalable fashion in the tech. So how do you approach tech? Do you have any favorites? Do you have anything you're looking at or?
So I've got a couple of different thoughts. One, conceptually, I think this is a great question. You're making me think of Good to Great by Jim Collins, where one of the
Nice.
things that he really pushes on and is right is technology is an enabler, but it's not a strategy, right? Companies that are consistently successful have a core strategy that the technology just helps them use it better, faster, whatever, right? But it's not the thing that
Right.
drives the company. And I think that's a great lead into your question. So for us, from a stack standpoint, we've got a ton of stuff going on. We certainly have a CRM, an automation system. We use Google Analytics. For us, our systems happen to be Salesforce and HubSpot. We also work with a platform called Hive9, which is a marketing performance tool that you can basically layer in your marketing calendar plus all of your tech stack.
Oh, that's
And it
cool.
helps create
Yeah.
some connectivity, right? I took action here and then I saw a signal here. So
Mm,
that's how we're actively trying to get to some of the stuff that we're talking about. Um, Issues or comments with regards to the tech stack, I think the advancements in marketing are the same things that make it harder to have a tech stack, right? So things like account-based marketing, where you have to be hyper focused, hyper targeted. You're not sending out one email, you're sending out 20 into all of these different personas, right? The elegance of that and the complexity of that and the increased volume that that creates also means that the tech stack to support something like that is that much more complex and elegant,
true.
right? So I don't know anybody, no matter what your CRM or your automation tool, that doesn't sometimes kind of shake their fist a little bit and be like, why is this so complicated? But the answer is because that's the state of marketing, right?
Yes.
There's a
Right.
reason why tech and marketing are, joined at the hip. And so I think it comes part and parcel. Um, I think we could or could not talk endlessly about how that impacts how you hire, right? And how you
Mm,
create a marketing team and what the right roles are these days. But it is an important question, especially if you're really starting out fresh, fleshing out your team, fleshing out your stack, to really think about what do you need to
right.
have on your team to be successful.
Okay. Love that. I, I, you're my new favorite philosopher
Oh,
because
geez.
um happy Friday. We're not even drinking, people. We're just podcasting. Can you imagine? Pull up, get out the absinthe and then away we go. There's a hyper focus and elegance and the complexity that comes with ABM. And I want to ask you about ABM, but just calling out the fact that yes, the strategy is there's more to it. So your tech, you're going to need more to it. It's not, the more interesting you get and the more strategies you pursue, in the early days, no, your Excel spreadsheet's not going to cover you here. You do need a
Right.
CRM. You do need now marketing automation, nurture, and go long term. Oh, you want to go ABM? You do need to be able to address it in a more complex way. It's an account now, and yes, it is. It is evolving, but it's also you're stepping up your game. So expecting the tech to get a little more interesting, that's okay. I mean, I think everyone's trying to, it's simple. Let's keep everything simple. Well, sometimes it's just not simple. You're
Yeah.
asking to do something powerful. You need something powerful as a result. So, um, love to get what's your take? What's your philosopher's stone, no nonsense approach to ABM?
So we are really diving into ABM this year. Not
Yeah.
that we haven't been really fantastic about targeting and tailoring our messages in the past, but I think there's always something to attaching a name to something, right?
Right.
That really coalesces
Oh yeah.
your strategy. So that's where we are. And I think Taconic is a highly technical company in a highly technical industry. We're biotech, right? And so we are the poster child for a company that should be doing ABM. So I'll tell you, it's a lot of work, right? It is a lot of work. Your throughput is going to go up, right? Because you're not sending out one general message, you're sending out whatever 20, 50, whatever your segmentation is now, and then you're tracking the engagement across all of these micro channels, maybe we'll call them. And so it definitely escalates the type of work. I think there's steps that you can take to make it scalable, and I think that goes back to your tech stack, right? The one piece of advice I would give to people, whether it's ABM or again, especially if you're at those first few steps in creating a team or a tech stack, and you said this simplicity, I think that is the right first step. And
Mm.
the reason why I say that is you can always add complexity to your systems and your stack, but you can't ever claw it back out if you baked it into its basic functionality. Does that make sense? And so
Yes.
we've definitely seen that at different companies where we've done it both ways. And I'll tell you, if you're just starting out, make it simple, make it work, know it cold, and then add a layer and then add a layer. And it helps not only with understanding your tech stack, it helps with keeping your data clean and manageable. It helps you when you're hiring those first few employees. They don't have to be super detailed, right? You can add that level of complexity within your
Yeah.
team, just like you are to your system. So simple isn't bad. I think it just depends on where you are in the evolution of your marketing team.
So cool. It's hard to claw it back out if it's baked in. That's the key part. Because you can always simplify things, not if the essence of it has the complexity built into how you're even addressing it in the first place. Now you're really in trouble. You may have to even start over, as opposed to this is our simplest, MVP viable campaign here. Let's start there. And I love that you can always add in more bells and whistles to the reporting side and to everything. But I think that also at the same time, it can be a lot easier to track because you're like this. We're going after this particular actual account. Is it working or not? Are they have they signed up for us? And you can figure out why exactly, what kind of got their attention. That might be harder to figure out or deduce, but to say, okay, they're a priority. Are we have we connected with them? Are they engaged? They know we exist. Yes. Okay. Cool. They know. Have they
Yep.
bought from us yet? Yes. Okay, great. So there is some if you can start with simplicity, there are some easy answers, but then you're right. Now it's like, how do we do that with 2 accounts, 3 accounts? How do you have certain numbers or ratios you like? And do you have different tiers of accounts? Do you prioritize them that way? How do you approach, instead of boiling the ocean, you sort of the focus into a few?
Yeah, I think we've always been pretty good about this, but again, naming a strategy like account-based marketing, I think helps all the more because there's some defined elements of it that force your hand. And
Yes.
so the idea of the ideal customer profile goes hand in hand with account-based marketing. And I'm going to say that actually takes us back to the flywheel in the sense that that's not a marketing decision, right? That's a product, sales, and marketing
True.
decision. And we've had some really fantastic conversations recently because we absolutely have to be aligned. It would crumble if I made this decision on my own. It's not mine to make. And so I do love that the dogma of ABM forces alignment. And I know you and I both know Sangram Vajri. I've read ABM is B2B. It's a fantastic book. His work is fantastic. But I think maybe the very best part of it is what it does to a company, not what it does to marketing, right? Because marketing can implement targeting and focusing and be successful, right? That's what we've all been doing probably for the past 10 years. What's different about ABM is it's more of a corporate level strategy. It forces all of us to think, do we want to go after everybody? Does that make sense? Does that align with our strategy? Are we spending the right money to get the right customers? Is our customer acquisition cost and lifetime value ratios in balance to justify this? I don't know. Let's have these conversations, right?
Right.
And really dive into it and then pull that back into your ABM strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. So many things there. And shout out to Sangram. What's up, buddy? How are you? We were just in his peak community that he has. If anyone hasn't heard of that, he has a group of marketers. He just gets
Yeah.
together and we have presentations and we get to learn from really smart people, albeit some of the people who have been guests on this show. So so I don't
There
know
you
who's
go.
getting whose list from who, but hey, but no,
Great
they're
minds, great minds.
great people, great minds. You brought up one of the biggest things that it's been my complaint or other people's issues with the idea of the account-based marketing is just calling it marketing, and that
Yeah.
you're right, you can't decide an ideal customer profile in a silo. Like no one should decide that, independent of the rest of everyone else. And so it really is a company decision. So what is it, like account-based company ABC? Hey.
We
Well,
did joke about this,
yeah,
right? That,
yeah,
I started socializing it several months ago, let's say maybe 6 months ago, because I wanted people to understand the concept, become familiar with it, Google it, right? There's so much literature out there, which is fantastic. And everybody did that, and which was fantastic. And they got excited, but then they almost immediately were like, wait a minute, but you said that this is going to involve everybody, but it just says marketing. And you said it's going to be about targeting, but is it just accounts? I thought we could target specific personas or market segments. And it's like, wait a minute. It's a kind of a double-edged sword, right? Naming something, I think, does help focus everybody and say, this isn't my strategy that I made up, right? This is an accepted practice, right? That has some best practices that come with it that we should take advantage of. But how we implement it for our company is personal to us, right? So whether we target at the contact level, at the account level, at the geography level, all three, none of the above, that should be decided within each company. So it was kind of interesting from a marketer's perspective. Did we
yeah,
brand this right? Did we use the term and did it help us to use it or did it hurt us? I think ultimately it helped us because I think
yes,
people could see just how much hype there is on this in the internet and in all of these different very well respected areas. But it did cause some confusion where we did have to double back and say, this is what it's going to mean for us. Let's talk about that.
yeah, yeah, and there's you could go off on a mega tangent, like what would you rename it to get all the other groups to play, because like, oh,
Right.
marketing will play ball no matter what you call it. Give it a logo and they'll join in. Name it something to do with sales, so sales will think it's a sales training, and then yeah, like you kind of shove it all together. But hey, it's good enough for
Yeah.
now. It focuses us on the conversation. I guess back to Sangram. ABM is B2B. Like the title makes sense. It's less about marketing and more about just the company itself selling to businesses. So makes total sense. Uh, had a thought. Did you have a thought or?
No, well, you brought up the conversation we had at the Peak community
Yeah.
yesterday, and there was a fantastic speaker. And one of the things she said, I actually linked to what you and I are talking about, is ABM or really anything that we're saying that makes the marketing concept bigger than marketing, right? And it elevates it to that corporate strategy. This woman, several people asked her, how do you get to be a CMO? I think this is the answer to that, right? She said, you
Yes.
think outside of marketing, you think, how can I solve corporate level problems? ABM, or just that line of thought, is part of the answer, one potential answer, right? So for folks that are trying to think of breaking out of just the vertical of marketing, I think this flywheel concept is part of it. And I think ABM, or again, just that line of thought of what is our corporate strategy, is another way to do that.
Elevate to the CMO by solving corporate level problems.
Yep.
Totally makes sense. And then recently, I've taken on the CEO role of my own company, and no longer get to dance around and be the CMO and have a great time. But as I think about things that I'm expecting from the marketer on our team, Christina, who's amazing, is the more she can solve corporate level problems. Like I've had to watch my brain start thinking at a different level. At like,
Hmm.
okay, now I have all these functions reporting to me. Now I have to think in this way. Um, and you're right. Yeah, as I think of, yeah, as she solves here and there these different problems that are actually corporate level problems that are problems for me that I'm trying to like that is so helpful. And
Yeah.
it's like you're proving yourself critical to the CEO by addressing things again to your customer, the CEO, like things that the team really needs help with. It has nothing to do necessarily with just that one marketing aspect, but it's the big company picture. So yeah, that's brilliant. Where do you see the future? Or what's exciting you about the future? There's a lot of changes. We're in COVID land and all that stuff still. Do you
Still.
see any tech or strategies or behavior changes, or what gets you jazzed? We've talked about what kind of keeps you up, but what gets you just excited to log in the morning?
So I did think about this ahead of time. I'm
Yeah.
going to give you two different answers. One, I think piggybacks off of what we were just talking about. So I'll start there. There definitely is a pattern, and I've listened to several podcasts and news reports on this, that there's an increase in CMOs becoming CEOs. And I love that. And I think what we were just talking about is the reason behind it, right? That if marketing's done well now, it's not just marketing, right? It is implementing the corporate strategy again and again and again through what you bring to the market, right? Marketing has the word market in it. So the whole
Yeah.
point is to address the market needs in a way that brings value to the customer and profit to the company. So somebody that has a keen understanding of that, I think, is fantastic. Again, you see examples of this. So I absolutely love that. I will say that our CEO has a marketing background, and it certainly impacts how she views things in the conversations that we have. The
Wow.
second thing,
Awesome to
yeah,
work for a CEO that values marketing too.
she's fantastic. Yes, we are really fortunate. The second thing that I was thinking about is the authenticity of marketing, and I think this is was already true pre-COVID, but has only become more true since COVID. And so, back Mad Men type of era, marketing was so superficial, right? And
Yeah,
almost duping the consumer. And we're
totally.
so at the opposite end of that spectrum with authenticity and the relationship that you can build between brands and consumers that is genuine and intimate and isn't separated by all of these different layers. And I think it's on a couple of things. One, I love the social responsibility aspect of it. That means something to me personally. And so I think companies embracing that as part of their authenticity is fantastic. The other thing that I think is really lovely is that type of marketing is more attainable for small business,
Mm,
right? It's not
mhm.
about taking out a Super Bowl commercial, right? Anybody can have a social media page and create genuine videos, right? And testimonials and connecting with people. And so I think it's opened up the door for small businesses to break out of the brick and mortar constraints that they would have had 10 plus years ago, right? And really thrive because they have a direct connection to potential customers and their consumers. So those are the two things that I'm really loving right now.
Yeah, I can see. I know we talked earlier. You love what you do, and I can see why. Describing these things, and I'm with you on the authenticity. Actually, before even that, you had this beautiful quote about the value to the customer and the profit to the company. Like you're speaking, it's just yeah, absolutely. And then on the authenticity side, that duping the customer. I think that's why early on, I really gravitated toward the B2B side. And I had a chance to play in the B2C side a bit. And it almost felt like sometimes it was very hard to tell if you're just trying to dupe their medulla oblongata, or like were you trying to just get to their inside brain and make it buy another pair of running shoes, as opposed to you actually need this thing,
Right.
and it's going to solve a problem, a specific problem at your company. Now of course both B2C and B2B have their dupingness, I guess, that you want to try to avoid, but at least on the B2B side, the hope was that it was a little more rational, which I guess is debatable, but at least there's sometimes hopefully there's a defined problem, or they help you find a problem that you can specifically address, and it's a little more considered. And I always liked that because it meant that it was that much more of a chance that I was actually helping someone else out too.
I think that's a fair statement, right? Your motivations as a consumer on the B2B side are different by definition, right? I am making a decision on behalf of the company, not my own personal needs.
Yeah.
That will color my decision because how can it not? We're all humans, but the motivating factors are beyond just me. So I think there's a lot of truth in what you said.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Man, this has been fun and crazy. I'm curious now. Who are you? Who are you? Take me back to like little Kelly days. What was it like growing up? Where'd you grow up? And did you always know you're destined to be in marketing and a business thought leader?
No. No. So, I am from upstate New York.
Okay.
Knew that I loved science. I would say I am curious by nature. Maybe that's the one word that I would
Yeah.
associate with me, and that's always been true. Um, so loved the science aspect. Went to a small liberal arts college right outside of Albany for biology because I liked it, but had no
Right.
idea what I was going to do with it. I knew I didn't want to be in a lab. That wasn't for me. I love the output, right? But not the day to day being in there and conducting the
Yeah.
experiments. It just wasn't for me. And at some point along the way, someone said, "Gosh, pharmaceutical sales sounds like a nice balance for you because you literally are out and about talking
Yeah.
about science." And I was like, well, gosh, that does sound really lovely. And so I got my MBA, was really fortunate to get hired into a fantastic women's health company, and spent 5 years doing sales and field marketing. I was a field marketing liaison for them. And it was fantastic. And it really was a perfect
Mm.
first job because it gives you such a good baseline. Say what you want about pharmaceutical companies, but man, they do sales and marketing really well.
Do
So
they?
they are as buttoned up could possibly be, and I had a
Wow.
fantastic company on top of all of that, kind of formality in how they did
Yeah.
things, and so it was just a perfect first experience. And so then after that, I actually went to the opposite end of the spectrum, and that is back to research and development for new medicines. And
Hmm.
so I ended up becoming a business development manager for what we call a contract research organization. So all of these research institutions, whether it be pharma companies, biotechs, or even academic institutions, not all of them have their own lab space. It doesn't make
Right.
sense for them to, right? It's an incredible amount of overhead. So you can outsource your scientists. So I
Wow.
spent about 5 years in sales and marketing, business development, basically selling integrated drug discovery programs, and then
Wow.
left the industry to work in sales and marketing for a smaller company, and then came back about 5 years ago and have been with Taconic ever since.
Wow. It's, you know, tell me about that because you were the biology side. It's cool that you you sort of went for it, and then along the way, you're. Do you remember a particular? Was it like because if you're majoring in bio, you're doing a lot of lab work. Do you remember a particular day where you're like, oh God, I'm growing fungus again or something, and you were just like, it's not this part. And do you remember who told you about the more of the sales and marketing side?
It is a really good question, and I don't think we talk enough about this. I actually was on a panel before COVID at a local pharmacy school because
Cool.
everybody was asking similar questions, right? I have this passion. I'm about to have this degree. I could be a pharmacist in this case, or I could be fill in the blank, right?
Right.
So, to answer your question, I don't know if it was a moment. Maybe it was like, the third shower, you're trying to get the formaldehyde smell off of you and it's just not helping. I don't know. Um, but
Yeah,
it just kind of
they use that a
happened.
lot, right? I think back to ninth grade and
Yeah. So I don't know if there was an inflection point. Just at some point, it kind of dawned on me that, I love this, but I don't know what I want to do with this. And
Mhm.
I think that's for anybody, probably in any discipline. Obviously, science is mine, but there's a million different avenues you can take. You can be a corporate lawyer, you can be in marketing, you can be in sales. There's so many
Right,
different ways, no matter what your given discipline is that you love. And so I think that is a really good point.
right. Huh. It's just cool that you can be still and you're still in a realm that you always liked to begin with. You're just a different aspect of it, and you've been able to just experience both the sales and marketing side. That's gotta have. Yeah, every time you meet a marketer who's done sales. I mean, you even shared earlier the respect you have for sales is there. You understand the challenge they have. It's not all, sometimes when you have like the people who haven't done the other job, like, oh, I can do a better job of that any day. It's like, well,
Yeah.
try.
I think it goes back to the flywheel, and I would say certainly impacted my journey in that I've worked for absolutely second to none sales teams. But what I
Hmm.
would say is, I don't care how good your sales team is, if the product isn't there, if the marketing isn't there, sales can't save you. And that was part of why I kept migrating earlier on in the process, because I saw it as a way to amplify the value, right? The better you can be as early as you can be, then
Hmm.
everything else downstream gets 1,000 times easier. There's a fantastic book about this. It's called Developing Products in Half the Time. And one of the concepts that they talk about is the fuzzy front end of the development process. And one of the things they say is mistakes up here cost you so little versus mistakes downstream cost you everything, right? So take the time in those first turns of the flywheel, whatever you want to call it, to perfect what you're doing, because everything else gets easier. And I think that's, to me, the takeaway that I had from sales is that, gosh, I was in meetings where I don't know what to say. I don't, you have a fantastic and legitimate question, customer. I don't have the answer, but I should, right? I should. Someone
Yeah.
should have prepared me for this moment, because there is a fantastic answer and it should be captured and written and on a piece of paper on our website, plastered on the wall, whatever the case may be. And so that was really for me why, really, it wasn't even one particular moment. I just started migrating. I would take on more responsibilities on the marketing side because it was like, gosh, this isn't just me. Everybody would benefit from this. So that's kind of where I'm going with that amplification is you get this right up front and it just goes like this.
Yeah, man. Well, one of the things that I wanted to ask you is a hypothetical question. And I may or may not have a time machine in Nashville, New Hampshire. And let's say, COVID is ending and wipe it all down. I mean, it's in the backyard covered in tarp. So we got to get the squirrels out of it and all that. But you get a chance to use it and you go back in time. You get to meet yourself after graduating with that degree. And I don't know if around that point of time you knew to try out those things or not, but you get to go meet yourself kind of in that transitionary moment of you've got your degree now, fly and go. So you get to meet that Kelly. What kind of advice would you give her, knowing all the things you've been through and experiences and the jobs and all the life lessons? What kind of things would you tell her?
So I might be in marketing now, but you can't ever really get the salesperson out of you. So I'd be lying if I said I wasn't really competitive. I like to win. I like to be at the top of that leaderboard. Um, and I've always kind of been a perfectionist, for better or for worse. And I think when you're starting out in your career, you see these people, right? And they seem perfect because they've achieved such success. And you read their books and you watch their documentaries, and that doesn't always show all the other mistakes that came along with getting to that success. And so it's an unrealistic goal to think that either you are perfect as a person or that your journey is going to be perfect. You're going to make mistakes along the way. You've got to learn from them. And I would say the big thing is, for all of us, you got to forgive yourself for not knowing at the time what you could never have known at the time, right? There's no
Yeah.
way that you can have knowledge from experience and maturity and having walked the walk when you haven't done that yet. It's almost silly to
Hmm.
even say it out loud. But I definitely have thought that way over time, where it's like, gosh, I should have foreseen this coming. What's the matter with me? But how could you? You've never had this happen to you before. And I
Yeah.
think, embracing that, talk to people who've been there, debrief on it, postmort on it, talk about it, write things down, teach yourself lessons along the way, share them with other people, because it's the stuff that you're going to pull from later, right? I'm sure everybody would agree that the stumbles that you have are the stories that you tell the next time around when you're like, I know the solution. I know what we're going to be up against, and I know what to do about it now. So that would be my advice for my younger self.
I love that. The stumbles are the stories.
Yep.
no one has ever taken up the time machine on undoing a stumble. In over
Mm,
230 podcasts, no one has said, yeah, this thing. They've only
yeah.
just sort of encouraged themselves, or to your point, forgive yourself. It's okay. It's a great point, and even tied back to, did you call it a fuzzy front in that book? What was that book you?
Yeah, and it's not my term. It's literally the term that they use in the book. They call it the fuzzy front end. So it's
Front
basically just
end.
the first part of the product development process where it is kind of nebulous, right? You're brainstorming, you're sitting around a table, you're trying to figure it all out. Take the time to do that, honor that time to
Yeah.
do it. Don't rush through it thinking that the process will save you, right? Going back to what we
Right.
talked about, be super critical, ask each other questions because that's the time to poke holes in it, right? Not 2 years and however amount of money and internal resources
Yeah.
after.
I feel like there's a parallel there to when you're early in your career and you're trying to
Mm,
figure things out and to be okay with the fuzziness that goes on when you don't really know. I was a recruiter for 7 months. Like, cool, okay, I learned
yeah,
things. It's okay, but finding out that sooner than later that maybe that's not your job, or like you found out, I don't really want to be a lab tech. There's something else for me to do here on this mission, and you can sort it out so that now we're not chatting and you're just now getting out of the lab, and you've been
right,
miserable for 10
right.
years. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense, man.
That's a
um
fantastic parallel.
yeah, you did it. I just heard it.
Teamwork, teamwork.
Teamwork, go team. So tell me, COVID, how you staying sane? You have some trips planned, and what do you do for fun these days?
Sure. So we've got two boys. So that's a whole lot of fun right there, even
There
if
it
you don't
is.
add in anything else, right? They're baked in fun. And they're fantastic. And we're so fortunate that, how can you complain if you can check the big boxes in life, man, what is there to complain
Yeah.
about? So, we enjoy travel. I would say we enjoy exploring. So we've just had to redefine what that means a little bit. It's not going overseas or getting on planes as often, but we've discovered all of these different paths around our house that, what, I'm not gonna lie, I probably wouldn't have found them if I had other maybe more grandiose things to do, but it's been so fun. We adopted a dog, we've done all of these
What kind
things.
of dog?
She is what they call a red heeler. She's a cattle dog.
Red healer.
A red
Cool.
heeler. So heeler like the backs of your heels. So when they would herd cattle, they would nip at their heels. So that's why she is a heeler, Heeler.
Oh, you look at that. That's a cool looking dog. Oh yeah.
She's a cutie. She's a good girl.
That is it. That sort of brown, tan,
Yeah,
golden
she's like,
color.
her name's Red. So she's like a reddish brown,
Oh
and then she's
wow.
got freckles on her paws. I mean, she's a cutie. She's a
Fancy.
cutie.
Awesome. And so you no dog before that? So the boys like just stoked to have a critter running around.
We had a dog before, but I would say he was the most undog dog there
Gotcha.
was ever.
Almost like a
So
cat.
just he was his own person, and you know what, he was lovely, but she
Right.
is, I would say, much more their speed, much more rough and tumble, get into it with you and wrestle and stuff. So they've had an absolute blast with her.
No doubt. No doubt. And I think you said earlier you're probably going to cancel the trips overseas and that kind of thing. Are you
I
thinking
know we
that's
were talking about Paris. We had,
yeah.
we keep having this trip that we kind of kick the can down the street every time we push it. But if you can't go into museums, if you can't do the things that make any foreign excursion worth it, then I would rather wait. We'd rather wait and do it right. So
Yeah.
lots more exploring around areas where we can drive these days.
Totally. Totally. What was it like booked for the summertime or something? And you're thinking summertime is probably too soon or
Yeah, I mean, I will hold on with my fingernails until the absolute last second that I have to cancel because that's
yeah.
me, like, fingers crossed, maybe something
Yeah.
will happen. I forget the dates. I think it's in July.
July. Yeah. Oh, that'd be beautiful. I went
Yeah.
last year for the first time. Last year? Before last year.
I was
Last
gonna
year
say,
was a
did
blur.
you though?
2020 didn't actually happen in my memory. I didn't do
Yeah.
anything last year. So yeah, no, 2019, first time. And yeah, what's interesting? I liked it because of the delta of what I thought how much I would like it to how much I really did. I kind of
Wow.
had the negative brand impression of the rude Parisians and don't even try to speak French because they're gonna call you on being a bad speaker and no. No, I didn't have any of that. And it was great. But I immediately understood the culture was, hey, let's drink wine. Let's eat really good food. Let's just kind of enjoy life. Like that's
Yeah.
what we're going to do. And everything else is like secondary to that. And as soon as I sort of got on board with that,
Yeah.
everything just sort of clicked. And I was like, okay, I'm in. Sign me up.
Agreed. I have not had a bad experience in any travel excursion. Fingers crossed, knock on whatever. Every place is different, but to your point, there's a lesson
Yeah.
everywhere. And that's why you go, right? It's beautiful
Right.
scenery, it's great people, and you learn a different way to live your life, even if it's just for, a week or whatever that time is.
Yeah. And apparently this is the number one podcast, or we're battling for number one marketing podcast in Azerbaijan. So at some point
Love
I'm
it.
just going to need to visit and then, have a little party
I
with
love it.
all the listeners.
There you
Where
go.
one day we're coming, Azerbaijan. Hang in there. Awesome. Awesome. Well, hey, where can people connect with you if they want to reach out? Just, get connected.
Yeah, I would say LinkedIn is where it's at for me. So Kelly Owen Grover, MBA on LinkedIn. Would love to hear from anybody. I am, a nerd for all of these marketing things. So nerd out,
Yeah.
reach out to me, send me what you guys are hearing. I would love to hear about it. I think that to me is part of the attraction with marketing is it is a discipline. You can study it. It's innovating, it's tech driven, it's never boring. I think there's
Yeah.
just so much to love about it that it doesn't get boring, because to me that would be the worst, is that, you've done it all, you've learned it all, and there's nothing new.
Right. Right. Then it's time to just hang up the hat. No, that's fantastic. So good. Thank you so much for coming on here and hanging out and talking shop with me and schooling me on all your philosophies. I don't know if you realize you're getting even philosophical. You have some real experience. I can tell that you know what you're talking about.
Well, I think that is a lovely compliment. I appreciate it. And it was fun. I love stuff like this. I think your questions were spot on. I hope your listeners get a lot out of it. And I think it's a topic that we don't talk about as often with marketing,
Yeah,
because I think there are new shiny things like social and digital that people talk about more often. And it's not to say that one is more important than the other, but I think it's just a different angle, and I think it's a more elevated angle that for folks that are looking to maybe transition, it's just something to think about.
100%. You can spend lots of money on shiny objects. You see it all the time, and then that never can it can have zero equation over to the revenue side if you're not managing process. Without the process, you could be burning the cash on the front end. So it's critical. It's really important step. So I'm glad you addressed it for sure. It really got people thinking about, and also just the feeling of what it's like to work in a company where sales and product and marketing are in the same process together.
Yeah.
It sounded really good. I was like, I want that. Sign me up for that. That sounds really
We're
good.
not perfect, but we're trying to be, right? It's that
Right.
journey of trying to be,
Right.
and I think we're all rowing in the same direction, and they're fantastic people, which that's 90% of it, right? Get the right people in the boat with you and just start rowing in the same direction.
Yeah. It's all about the people. People
Yep.
make it so much better.
Agreed.
For sure. Well, Kelly, this has been awesome. Thank you so
Agreed.
much.
Thank you, Casey. Appreciate it.
And for those listening, this has been the Hardcore Marketing Show. We will catch you all next time.